My name is Serafina Vale. I was 33 years old when I learned that some people do not betray you by breaking promises. They betray you by explaining that the promises never meant anything in the first place. Caleb Mercer and I had been together for 6 years. Living together for 4. We were not married. But for all practical purposes, our lives had become braided together. Same apartment. Same grocery list. Same weekend routines. Same favorite Thai place around the corner, where the owner already knew Caleb liked extra lime, and I always asked for less chili even though I never admitted it. People used to say we seemed steady. I used to believe them. When we first started talking seriously about building a future, I brought up finances. Not in a dramatic way. Not because I wanted control over his money, or because I imagined some perfect romantic fantasy where love meant never calculating anything. I simply thought that if 2 adults were sharing a home, planning long-term, and calling each other family, then at least part of their financial life should reflect that. I suggested a joint account for shared expenses, nothing extreme. Rent, utilities, groceries, maybe emergency savings for anything connected to the apartment. We could still keep separate personal accounts. I had no issue with independence. I just believed partnership should have a practical shape. Caleb shut it down before I finished explaining. I believe in financial independence, he said, leaning back in his chair like he had just delivered a mature and enlightened conclusion. My money is my money. Your money is yours. I remember laughing softly, because I thought he was exaggerating. He was not. He looked at me with this calm as almost patient expression. As if I were a child asking why rain existed. I'm serious. Sarah. I've seen people ruin relationships by mixing money. Separate is cleaner. No resentment. No confusion. Looking back, I should have felt the chill in that sentence. Separate is cleaner. As if love was a stain he was trying to prevent, but I was in love. And when you are in love, you can mistake selfishness for boundaries if it is spoken gently enough. So we agreed to split all shared expenses proportional to income. At the time, I worked in marketing and made about $65,000 a year. Caleb worked in sales and made around $85,000. He liked reminding people he was good with money, even though what he really meant was that he was good at guarding his money. He created a spreadsheet. At first, it seemed almost funny. Rent, utilities, internet, groceries, dinners out, household supplies. Everything had a line. Everything had a date. Everything had a formula. If I bought detergent, he entered it. If he paid for takeout, he entered it. If we went to dinner and one of us had a drink while the other did not, Caleb sometimes adjusted the amount down to the dollar. Fair is fair, he would say. And I would tell myself that fairness mattered. The system worked as long as life behaved. That is something nobody warns you about. Rigid people can seem principled when nothing is going wrong. Their rules feel harmless until you are the one bleeding against them. Then last year, my company went through layoffs. I still remember the conference room. The gray carpet, the HR woman who would not meet anyone's eyes, the folded packet on the table in front of me. I remember nodding like I understood, like I was calm. Like my body had not gone cold from the inside out. I came home early with a cardboard box in my arms. Caleb was at the kitchen island, scrolling on his phone. He looked up and immediately frowned. What happened? I got laid off. His face changed. But not in the way I needed. There was surprise. Yes. Concern for maybe 2 seconds. Then calculation. Did they give severance? That was his first question. Not, are you okay? Not, come here. Not, we'll figure it out. Did they give severance? I told him it was small. Enough to stretch for a little while if I was careful. I had emergency savings. but not enough to keep paying my share forever. The economy was rough. Marketing roles were freezing. Every posting had hundreds of applicants by the time I saw it. For the first month, I tried to handle everything alone. I applied to jobs every morning until my eyes burned. I rewrote my resume. I took calls with recruiters who sounded hopeful and then disappeared. I picked up small freelance gigs that paid late and demanded too much. I stopped ordering coffee. I canceled subscriptions. I sold a designer coat my mother had given me before she passed away. Then cried in my car, after handing it to a stranger in a grocery store parking lot. Caleb watched all of this happen from the other side of our spreadsheet. He did not offer once. Finally, when my savings had thinned to a number that made my stomach twist, I sat him down. I need us to temporarily adjust the bill split, I said. Just until I'm working again. I'm not asking you to cover everything, forever. I can pay you back. Caleb's expression closed before I even finished. Your job problems aren't my problems. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. What? He sighed. Sarah, I'm not touching my savings because you can't find work. The room became too quiet. The refrigerator hummed behind him. Somewhere outside, Edo Bagel. Ordinary sounds kept happening while something inside me cracked. We've been together 6 years, I said. We live together. We talk about a future. Isn't this the kind of thing partners help each other through? He rubbed his forehead like I was exhausting him. That's emotional thinking. I stared at him. He continued. Real life doesn't work like that. We agreed to separate finances. You wanted to be treated like an equal. Right. This is equal. I never agreed that if one of us fell, the other would just watch. Caleb's mouth tightened. You're making this dramatic. I brought up the promises we had made each other. Not wedding vows exactly, but the private kind. The things people say at 2 a.m. when they think love has made them brave. Better or worse. No matter what, I've got you. He actually laughed under his breath. That's romantic stuff. Será. Ceremonial. Real life doesn't work that way. Ceremonial? That word stayed with me. For 3 months, I struggled to pay my portion of everything. I took gig work packing promotional boxes for a local company. I wrote product copy for a startup that paid me 2 weeks late. I sold books, jewelry, a camera lens I loved, and half the furniture from my old office corner. I kept a notebook full of job applications and rejection emails because I was terrified I would start believing Caleb's silence meant I was not trying hard enough. Meanwhile, Caleb's life did not change. He bought new shoes. He ordered expensive protein powders. He went out for weekend brunches with friends and came home smelling like citrus cocktails and restaurant smoke. He booked a self-care weekend at a spa resort because, as he put it, the work had been mentally brutal. The resort cost almost exactly what would have covered 2 months of my share of utilities. I should not have said anything. I knew that even before the words left my mouth, that trip could have helped with bills. I said quietly. Caleb looked up from unpacking his overnight bag. Maybe that'll motivate you to find a job faster. There are insults that arrive like slaps. That one arrived like a door locking. After that, his family began circling. His mother, Malena, called me one Tuesday afternoon while I was editing my resume for the 5th time that day. Sweetheart, she said, in a voice coated with concern and judgment. Caleb tells me you're still unemployed. Still, as if I had been lounging in silk pajamas while opportunity begged at the door. I'm applying every day. I said, well, sometimes people have to take whatever is available. Pride doesn't pay bills. Later that week, Caleb's older sister, Tessa, sent me links to job postings for dental assistants, insurance adjusters, warehouse supervisors, and one position requiring a nursing license. When I explained politely that those were outside my field or qualifications, she replied. I guess some people only want help if it looks exactly how they imagined. I stopped answering. But the breaking point came on a rainy evening in March. Caleb thought I was in the bedroom. I'd gone to the hallway closet to get a clean towel and heard his voice from the kitchen. He was on speaker with Tessa. I froze when I heard my name. I don't know why she's struggling so much, he said. It's not like marketing jobs are impossible to find. Tessa murmured something I could not catch. Then Caleb laughed. Honestly, I think she's getting comfortable letting me carry more weight. I stood there with one hand still on the closet door. Carry more weight. He had refused to carry anything. Not a bill. Not a worry. Not one corner of the fear that woke me up at 4 a.m, and yet there he was, turning himself into the burdened partner and me into a woman using him. I went back to the bedroom without the towel. That night, while Caleb slept beside me, I opened a note on my phone and typed the date. Then I wrote down what he had said. Not because I had a plan. Not yet. But because something in me understood that one day I might need proof that I had not imagined the cruelty. I kept applying. I kept smiling when people asked how the job search was going. I kept entering every grocery receipt into Caleb's spreadsheet, because apparently love was ceremonial. But formulas were sacred. Eventually, I landed a position at a smaller agency. The pay was less than my previous job. Around $55,000. But it was stable. I remember getting the offer email and sitting alone at the kitchen table, reading it 3 times while relief moved through me so sharply it almost hurt. When Caleb came home, I told him. He smiled and said, "See, you just needed pressure. Not congratulations. Not I'm proud of you. Pressure." I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and pressed my palms against the sink until my breathing slowed. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked tired, older, quieter, but behind her eyes, something had changed. I did not fight Caleb. I did not demand an apology. I did not tell him that I had started seeing him differently. I simply went back to work. I paid my portion of the bills. I rebuilt my savings slowly, and I watched, because life has a strange way of returning people to the exact classroom where they once mocked your lesson. Almost a year later, Caleb came home before sunset. That alone was unusual. His tie was loose. His eyes were red. He stood in the doorway holding his laptop bag, like he had forgotten what it was for. "What happened?" I asked. His mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Then he said, "My department was eliminated." The apartment became silent around us. Same kitchen. Same spreadsheet. Same 2 people. But this time, I was not the one holding the cardboard box. Caleb stood in the doorway for a long moment after telling me his department had been eliminated. His face looked pale in the yellow hallway light. And for one brief second, the old reflex inside me moved. The reflex to go to him, to touch his arm, to say, "We'll figure it out." To become soft before he even asked. But then another memory rose beneath it. Your job problems aren't my problems. So I stayed where I was. I asked the practical questions, because that was what he had taught me to do. Did they give severance? His eyes flicked toward mine. 2 months. I nodded. That helps. He stared at me, as if waiting for more. Maybe comfort. Maybe panic. Maybe the version of me who would have immediately opened her savings account and started calculating how to rescue him. But that woman had been trained out of me by the man standing in front of me. That evening, Caleb sat at the kitchen island with his laptop open but untouched. He kept rubbing his hand over his jaw. He made 3 phone calls. All short. All with the same controlled humiliation in his voice. "Yeah. Restructuring. Whole department. No." I didn't see it coming. By 10 o'clock, he had poured himself a whiskey and was staring at the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet he created. The spreadsheet he protected like scripture. "Finally," he said. "We need to talk about finances." I closed the book, I had been pretending to read. All right. He inhaled slowly. While I'm in transition, I think it makes sense for us to temporarily combine resources. There it was. Not a request. A revised philosophy. We can track it. He added quickly. Whatever you cover, I'll pay you back once I find something. But it doesn't make sense for me to drain my savings when we're living together. I looked at him for a long moment. The kitchen light made sharp shadows under his cheekbones. He looked tired and frightened, and a part of me hated that I noticed. I had loved him for 6 years. Pain does not erase itself just because someone earned it, but memory is loyal. 2. I remembered selling my mother's coat. I remembered his spa resort bag on the bedroom floor. I remembered him saying pressure had helped me, so I said, very quietly, "Your job problems aren't my problems." At first, he did not react. His face went blank, like the words had not landed properly. Then his eyes hardened. "Excuse me, you heard me." He pushed back from the counter. "Are you serious right now?" "Yes. We're together. Serafina. We're supposed to be a team." The sentence was so absurdly familiar that I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because grief sometimes comes out. Wearing the wrong face, I folded my hands on the table. That's ceremonial stuff. Caleb, real life doesn't work that way. The color drained from his face. Then it came back hot. "You're being vindictive." "I'm following the arrangement you insisted on." "No. You're punishing me." "I'm applying the same rule to both of us." He stood there breathing hard. And for the first time, I saw something crack in his certainty. Not remorse. Not yet. Just panic at discovering that the cage he built had a second lock. He stormed out of the apartment and came back a little over an hour later with his mother. Marlene entered like she owned the air. She did not greet me. She did not ask how I was. She set her purse on the counter and looked me up and down. "I cannot believe you," she said. "Caleb is going through one of the hardest moments of his life. And this is how you behave." I was sitting on the sofa by then. I did not stand. Where was this concern when I lost my job? Marlene's mouth tightened. That was different. "Why?" "Because Caleb has always been responsible with money. Your situation was your own fault." Caleb said nothing. That silence hurt more than her insult. I looked at him. "Do you agree with that?" He avoided my eyes. Marlene continued. "A good woman supports her partner. You don't kick a man when he's down." I almost smiled. "When I was down, you sent me job listings I wasn't qualified for, and told me pride didn't pay bills." Her face flushed. "I was trying to help." "No. You were trying to shame me," Caleb snapped. "Don't talk to my mother like that." And there it was again. The switch. His crisis became sacred. Mine had been a character flaw. I told them both my decision was final. Caleb could continue paying his portion from his severance and savings just as I had done during my unemployment. After all, he had earned more than I did for years. He had always said he was better with money. This should not be difficult. Marlene called me cold. Caleb called me heartless. I slept in the guest room that night and listened to them whisper in the kitchen until nearly midnight. For the next 5 days, Caleb barely spoke to me unless it was to throw one word into the room like a stone. Cruel. Petty. Unbelievable. Marlene sent long texts about how a real woman knew when to put pride aside. Tessa sent shorter ones. Sharper ones. Telling me I was embarrassing myself, and that everyone would see who I really was. But someone unexpected called me on the 6th day. Caleb's father. Graham. He had always been quieter than the rest of them. At family dinners, he mostly listened. Sometimes, he would start to speak, then stop, when Marlene cut across him. I had once mistaken that for peacefulness. Now I wondered if it was exhaustion. When I answered, I expected another lecture. Instead, he sighed and so. "He's just like his mother." I said nothing. Graham continued, his voice low. They never think rules apply to them. The words settled over me slowly. I don't want to drag you into this, I said. You didn't? He replied. They did. Then he changed the subject, asked if I was eating properly, and hung up before I could decide whether to cry. Things got worse the following week. Caleb stopped arguing only inside the apartment and started taking the story outside it. Mutual friends began messaging me. Are you okay? Caleb said things are bad. He said you're refusing to help him while he's unemployed. One friend, Dana, called with genuine concern in her voice. Sarah. He said, you're financially controlling him. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. Did he mention what happened when I lost my job? Silence. No, she said, slowly. So I told her, not emotionally, not dramatically. I told her about the spreadsheet, the separate accounts, the severance, the spa trip, the sentence, his sentence. By the end, Dana was quiet. I didn't know any of that. Most people don't. He made it sound like you force separate finances from the beginning. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. After that, I became more careful. I had already kept a few notes during my unemployment, after his words started feeling too slippery to hold in memory alone. Now I documented more consistently. Dates. Conversation. Texts. Who said what? Not because I wanted war, but because Caleb had begun rewriting the past while we were still standing inside it. His habits did not change. That was the part I could not understand at first. When I lost my job, I had cut everything down to the bone. Caleb, unemployed for less than 2 weeks, came home one afternoon with shopping bags from stores. He had no business visiting while panicking about bills. I raised an eyebrow. He saw it and snapped. I'm using money I saved. Unlike some people, the old me would have defended herself. The new me just wrote it down later. Last night, I thought we might have a breakthrough. Caleb sat across from me at the kitchen table. He looked less angry, more worn out. For the first time in days, his voice softened. I know I wasn't supportive when you lost your job, he said. The words hit me harder than I expected. I did not forgive him. But I leaned forward slightly because a starved part of me still recognized the smell of possible accountability. Thank you for saying that, I replied. He nodded, eyes lowered. Then he added, but you have to understand. When you lost your job, your whole company was downsizing. When I lost mine, they specifically targeted my department. It's completely different. The hope in me went out like a match in water. How does that make a practical difference? I asked. His answer came immediately. My job loss was unfair. Yours was just business. I stared at him. There are moments when someone reveals the architecture of their mind so clearly that you stop arguing because there is nothing left to misunderstand. In Caleb's world, pain was measured by ownership. His pain was injustice. Mine was inconvenience. His fear deserved rescue. Mine had needed discipline. 2 days later, Marlene organized a family meeting in our apartment without asking me. She arrived with Graham, Tessa, and Tessa's husband, Adrian. Caleb knew they were coming. I did not. I opened the door and saw all of them standing there. Marlene in front, like a prosecutor. We need to settle this, she said. I almost closed the door. Instead, I stepped aside. They gathered in my living room as if preparing for an intervention. Caleb sat beside his mother. Tessa crossed her arms. Graham stood near the window. Silence. Adrian looked uncomfortable, like he had been dragged into something he already regretted. Marlene began. Serafina, this has gone far enough. Caleb needs support. You are choosing pride over partnership. I looked at Caleb. You told them everything. He looked away. Tessa jumped in. You're humiliating him. No, I said. I'm refusing to rewrite the rules because they suddenly hurt him. Marlene's voice sharpened. Men and women are different. A woman should stand by her man in times of need. Adrien, who had not spoken until then, lifted his head. Wait. Everyone turned. He looked at Caleb first. Then Marlene? Wasn't separate finances Caleb's idea from the beginning? The room shifted. Marlene frowned. That's not the point. It seems like the whole point, Adrien said. If he made the arrangement, and she followed it when she was unemployed, why is it unfair when the same rule applies to him? Tessa snapped. Because he needs help now. So did she? Silence. Marlene's face hardened. A man losing his job is different. Adrien gave a humorless laugh. So, equality only matters when it benefits Caleb. No one spoke. Graham looked down at his hands. Caleb's jaw clenched. But he had no answer. The meeting ended without resolution. Marlene left angry. Tessa left offended. Adrien gave me a small apologetic nod at the door. Graham lingered just long enough to say, barely above a whisper, "Keep your records." Then he walked out. After that, I started noticing things. Caleb was on his phone more than usual, taking calls in the hallway, lowering his voice when I entered a room. Ons. I walked into the kitchen and he ended a call so fast, his thumb slipped against the screen. "I thought you were showering," he said. I looked at the phone in his hand. I was. He put it in his pocket. I was not snooping. I told myself that, repeatedly. But it is hard not to notice when the person beside you starts living with hidden doors. Then the mail began to tell its own story. A past due notice from one of his credit cards arrived first. He snatched it from the counter when he saw me glance at it. "Old balance," he said. I had not asked. A week later, I found another notice folded inside a junk mail envelope in the trash. Then, one for his car payment, marked urgent. Then another credit card envelope shoved into a drawer beneath batteries and tape. Caleb, the man who had lectured me about responsibility, the man who had watched me sell my belongings rather than help me, had been hiding late payments. The superior savings he bragged about did not seem to exist. The careful financial discipline he wore like a crown was beginning to look like costume jewelry. I scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney for the following week. I did not tell Caleb. Not yet. Maybe that sounds cold. Maybe it was. But by then, I understood something I wish I had understood earlier. When someone insists on separate lifeboats, you should believe them before the ship starts sinking. Caleb's portion of next month's bills was due in 2 weeks, and for the first time since I had known him, I was not afraid of what would happen when he missed it. The divorce attorney was nothing like I expected. I had imagined someone dramatic, someone eager to convince me that every disagreement was grounds for a courtroom battle. Instead, she was calm, practical, and almost disarmingly direct. After listening to the timeline and looking through the notes I had brought, she folded her hands. "You've only been living together under this financial arrangement for 4 years. Yes. No jointly owned property. No children." I shook my head. She nodded once. "That makes things considerably simpler." Simpler. It was a strange word for the end of 6 years, with someone I once imagined growing old beside. She advised me to continue documenting conversations, preserve text messages, and avoid emotional confrontations whenever possible. Facts age better than arguments, she told me. I wrote that sentence down before I left her office. A week later, Caleb's portion of the household bills became due. Nothing happened. No transfer. No explanation. 2 days passed. Then 3. Finally, I reminded him, "You haven't paid your share." He barely looked up from his phone. "I'm good for it." Those exact words irritated me far more than shouting would have. Good for it. As though responsibility had suddenly become optional. 3 more days passed. I finally texted him while I was at work. "If your portion isn't paid by Friday, I'll only pay my share of the rent and utilities." His response came less than 2 minutes later. Except, it wasn't a text. It was a phone call. He was at a friend's apartment. Judging by the noise behind him, "You're actually trying to make me homeless," he shouted. "No. You're trying to destroy my credit." I remember worrying about those exact same things. This is different. I closed my office door before answering. How? I told you I'd pay you back after I got another job. So did I. Silence. Then he yelled louder. You're being petty. I intended to repay any help you might have given me. 2. You're unbelievable. No. Caleb. I'm consistent. He cursed, hung up, and ignored me for the rest of the evening. The next day, something unexpected happened. His best friend, Olivia, messaged me. I almost ignored it. Instead, curiosity won. Would you have time to talk? We met at a small coffee shop halfway between our offices. She looked uncomfortable before I even sat down. I don't usually get involved in other people's relationships, she began. I figured. But, ew. I don't think you're crazy. That sentence alone almost made me laugh. Olivia stirred her coffee without drinking it. Caleb's always been strange about money. I stayed quiet. In college, he had roommates. He'd eat their groceries, then label his own shelves, so nobody touched his food. I blinked. He'd calculate utilities down to the penny. But whenever his friends stayed over for weekends, he'd somehow forget they used extra electricity or water. That sounds familiar. He always had an explanation. Shisaiha. Either he became defensive or acted like everyone was attacking him. Then she hesitated. There's something else. What? I probably shouldn't tell you. But Caleb talked to a divorce attorney months ago. I felt my stomach tighten. When you were unemployed. For several seconds I simply stared at her. He told me he wanted to know his options. Just in case. Just in case. While I was selling my belongings, while I was wondering whether we could survive unemployment together, he had already been quietly investigating how to leave. Olivia looked genuinely sorry. I thought you deserved to know. So did I. I thanked her before leaving. Walking back to my car, everything suddenly fit together differently. His complete refusal to help, the emotional distance, the constant insistence that everything remained separate. He hadn't simply lacked compassion. He had been protecting an exit. About a week later, another piece of the puzzle appeared. I was looking for scissors inside the kitchen junk drawer when I found several unopened envelopes buried underneath old instruction manuals. They were all addressed to Caleb. Car payment notices. Final reminder. Late fee added. Immediate action required. Apparently those weren't isolated mistakes. He had been behind for months. The man who spent years telling everyone how financially responsible he was had been quietly falling apart while pretending to stand above everyone else. His carefully crafted image had been just that, en image. Ironically, he finally paid his portion of the bills that same afternoon. Along with the payment came a long text message. You are financially abusive. You're controlling me when I need support the most. I read it twice. Then, I opened my saved screenshots. Months earlier, during my unemployment, Caleb had texted me almost identical words. Your financial problems are your responsibility. I'm not sacrificing my savings because of your situation. I simply sent those screenshots back. Nothing else. Several minutes later he replied, the difference is, I needed you to be strong back then. I needed to know you could handle problems. Now I need your support. Different times. Different needs. I looked at that message for a very long time. Then I realized there was no future left to rescue. The following Monday, I instructed my attorney to begin preparing the paperwork. Our lease expired in 3 months. I had already started searching for apartments. When Caleb received the divorce papers, his reactions changed almost hourly. First came disbelief. You're seriously throwing away 6 years over money. Then anger. You've been planning this. Then bargaining. We could start over. We could open a joint account. We could try counseling. We could design a completely different financial system. Every suggestion was everything I had asked for years earlier. Only now, he was the one needing it. When he realized I wasn't changing my mind, the public performances began. One Tuesday afternoon he appeared outside my office crying. Several coworkers saw him. My supervisor eventually stepped outside and politely asked him to leave. Later, my manager called me into her office. It was awkward. Embarrassing. Fortunately, she listened. After I explained the situation and showed her several messages, she simply nodded. If he comes back, let us handle it. I appreciated that more than she probably realized. Meanwhile, Caleb had started telling people an entirely different version of our relationship. According to him, he had simply outgrown us. He claimed we had different values, that he had tried everything, that I refused to compromise. Every few days, another mutual friend would quietly ask what had actually happened. By then, I had stopped defending myself emotionally. I simply told the truth. The documents usually spoke louder than I did. The financial disclosure process became the most revealing part of the divorce. Caleb had apparently told his attorney that I controlled all our finances throughout the relationship, that I hid money, that I dictated how bills were handled. Then my attorney produced years of spreadsheets, separate accounts, separate payments, separate savings. Every rule documented, every formula created by Caleb himself. The atmosphere in the room changed almost immediately. His attorney became noticeably quieter. Settlement discussions became remarkably more reasonable after that. Truth has a habit of simplifying negotiations. Around the same time, I learned several things I hadn't known. His credit score, worse than mine. His savings, far smaller than he had spent years implying. His vehicle, within weeks of repossession, for someone who had built his identity around financial superiority. Reality looked surprisingly fragile. Then Graham called again. How are you holding up? Better than I expected. He was quiet for several seconds. I should have left years ago. I knew exactly what he meant. I spent 35 years believing things would eventually become fair. He said, they never did. I wished him peace. He wished me freedom. Neither of us mentioned Marlene. A month later, Caleb found another job. It paid less than his previous position. Almost immediately, he tried using it to delay parts of the divorce. My attorney simply smiled. If Ms. Vale's unemployment didn't justify changing financial rules according to your own position, she told Caleb, your current employment doesn't change the legal facts either. There wasn't much left to argue after that. Around the same time, I received a modest promotion at work. Nothing life-changing. Just enough to make my new apartment comfortable. It was smaller than the place Caleb and I once shared, but every piece of furniture inside had become peaceful again. No spreadsheets on the refrigerator. No silent scorekeeping. No wondering whether compassion needed permission. I slowly reconnected with friends I had drifted away from over the years. One weekend, I met an old roommate for lunch. Another evening, I joined coworkers for trivia night. Life became surprisingly ordinary. And ordinary felt extraordinary. One Saturday afternoon, I ran into Olivia at the grocery store. She smiled sadly. Caleb's still telling people he left because you couldn't manage money. Isaiah. Before I could answer, she shook her head. Most people don't believe him anymore. Really? Anyone who knows both of you can see what actually happened. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that. The divorce should be finalized within another month or two. It's still messy sometimes. I occasionally discover one of Caleb's old belongings in a drawer. Every now and then, another angry message appears on my phone, blaming me for ruining his life. Marlene still sends texts insisting I abandoned a good man when he needed me most. I don't respond anymore. Some conversations deserve silence. Looking back now, I understand something I wish I had understood years earlier. You don't truly learn who someone is when life is easy. You learn when life becomes inconvenient. When I lost my job, Caleb showed me exactly how much compassion he believed I deserved. When he lost his, he expected a completely different standard. The double standard wasn't a mistake. It was his character. Standing up for myself cost me the relationship I thought I wanted. But it also gave me back the self-respect. I had been quietly sacrificing one spreadsheet at a time. Some mornings are still harder than others. Healing isn't a straight line. But every time I unlock the door to my apartment, knowing the life inside belongs entirely to me. I remember something that took me 6 years to understand. Real partnership isn't measured by how carefully two people divide the bills. It's measured by whether they reach for each other before they reach for the calculator.